So that's another thing I think in the industry. So that I emphasize in my training is, hey, I'm here for you. You click a link, you're human. In fact, I've clicked a link before. I was very embarrassed, but you know what I did? I didn't hide it out of embarrassment. I used myself as an example in my training.
Yeah,
I said,
there's something for everybody.
I'm the security guy. Yeah, I'm the security guy, and I fell for this.
Yep.
So don't feel stupid if you fall for a phishing email. It's okay.
Welcome to the CNL Podcast, where we dive deep into the minds of IT and security professionals to uncover their experiences, challenges, and best practices in today's ever-evolving tech landscape. I'm your host, Sedric Lusant, also known as your cyber expert. And today, I'm thrilled to welcome David McHenry, virtual CISO. Thanks for joining us today, David. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Sedric. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, awesome. Let's kick things off here and jump straight into your background. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started in the world of IT and security, and feel free, you can take us on the long road.
Okay, the long and winding road. Yeah, so I started off actually right around Y2K. That was a lot of people did. I came from the music industry, and a huge number of people from the music industry went into IT, which was very surprising to me at the time. I remember walking into my first IT job as a LAN technician and knowing half the guys on the team, and I was very surprised by that at the time because I thought I was going to be the weird one.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, hey, it's you and you and you. Oh, okay. And over the years, so many former musicians, I say former, but former professional musicians I've worked with. So it's pretty wild. So around Y2K, that came out, music career was winding down, because I used computers in my music, then it just sort of seemed like an evolutionary step because I was having to work on the computers,
you already had an edge.
Exactly. So I was, doing things. So I ended up taking some certification courses. I didn't really take that many courses. I had a good friend who ended up becoming a teacher for a long time. And so he would just come over to my house with a whiteboard and a couple of machines, and we would like run NT4 and tinker,
awesome.
and he would teach me. And I basically got my MCSE, which was the Microsoft certification at that time, which at that time was a big deal. It's since changed. I don't even know what they call it anymore. So that led to my first job in IT. And then it just was a rocket ride from there as far as I just kind of kept going and going and going. I was at the first part of my career, I was getting a new job almost every year, because the demand and opportunities and pay was increasing dramatically. And coming from the music industry, that was quite a shift because, in the music industry, the harder you work, probably the less you make almost, that's not completely true, but you know what I'm saying? It's not a direct correlation, right? So here I was coming in, getting promoted, getting a new job. I then spent 3 years at a radiology firm as their IT manager. I basically, I was the IT guy. I hired another guy to come in, and he and I were basically all things infrastructure, help desk, networking. I built all the computers out, all that. And I discovered that it appealed to my sense of creativity that I had from music, that creating something from nothing, which is how I feel when I, write a song or when I create any kind of piece of art. Well, it's the same kind of feeling when I put together a network and I piece together all the parts and everything goes together and it runs, and I set up all the DHCP and DNS and all those things that I was setting up. And so it was much more rewarding than I was expecting, because when you're a musician, the corporate world is a sellout thing, at least that's the perception back then.
Yeah.
And then I got into the corporate world and was enjoying myself as much or more,
Yep.
And I had a family, and so that was part of my shift, and moved on from there. And so eventually I ended up at a company called NFIB, National Federation of Independent Business. And the guy I worked for or reported to directly, Steve Grizzle, was just an amazing mentor to me. I worked there 8 years for him because I just loved him. He's retired now, the jerk. I wish he was still out there so I could work for him some more. But no, he's just a great guy. And he helped me not only in IT and security, but in mentoring people.
Mentoring is key.
Yeah, and I had as he said, I had a natural knack, and I had a team report to me, and I naturally worked well with them. But he wanted me to kind of learn why that worked, and I still, like everyone, I still had a lot to learn. So he was like, "You're great already, but you could improve in these areas, right?" And he even had recommended books for me to read. And then we'd have little discussions, which was completely outside of and completely voluntary, by the way. It wasn't like he was requiring it, but I took advantage of it because he was just he is a very wise and intelligent guy. So we ended up, they had a reshuffling right around, 2012, and I was laid off, and he was as well. And he said, because at that point I'd been infrastructure, but everything I did in infrastructure had a security focus. I was always thinking security, mission structures. Right. Exactly. It's a natural, again, a natural evolution, like when I went from music to IT. And he said, why don't you get certified and why don't you actually focus on a security career, And I was like, He said, and so I started studying, and he recommended I get the CISSP. I'm not sure. I know they've changed some of the requirements, but at that time, you had to have a current CISSP sponsor you.
You still do. You still do, or you have to prove you meet the requirements through.
You had to do that as well.
Experience and education, background, any other supplemental.
So I basically got together with that friend of mine who had taught me my MCSE like 10 years prior. And he and I would get together, and he wanted to learn it too. So we just got together and kind of did a study thing together. And then I was working a lot of contracts at that time while I was looking for something more permanent. And I was just studying and taking practice exams and all that. And so finally I went and took it, and it was a 6-hour exam, and I used every second of it. So no, I'm not going to be proud and lie. I struggled on that exam, but I did. I walked out and they said, "Congratulations." So first time. So that was good.
Steve, I feel you on that one. Cause when I took my CISSP, I was sweating because I saw I was getting a lot more. The questions were going up, and then it cut off before I knew the maximum amount of questions. And I didn't know if, did it cut off because I failed?
Right. And you're like,
and it said, "Congratulations." I was like, yes.
Well, see, I didn't get, so what happened with me is I was sure I was failing, because as many of the practice exams as I took, these questions, while they were similar, they weren't really the same. And
the exam is always tripping you up much more. And I feel like the words are always the word problem is always in a much more ambiguous fashion. And there's a minute detail if you overlook will make you get the question wrong.
Exactly. Well, I walked out, and it did not tell me on the screen. It just ended. And I was like, okay. So I walked out, and I was fully expecting them saying, "Oh, well, I'm sorry you failed, but maybe if you can come back and take it again," and blah, blah, blah. And I walked out, and they said, "Well, congratulations, you passed." So I was like, whoo. And then they went through the audit process, and they contacted not only Steve, who was sponsoring me, but apparently they reached out to other places I worked and just verified that I did what I said I did. And then I got my certification. That was in March of 2014 or April. I think that was March of 2014. And no, April. Sorry, April. And
hey, David, I lost you. I know it was still recording on your side, but I lost you on the CIS. Once we were talking about, you didn't see it on the screen. You walked out.
Got it. Okay. I'll repeat that. So I didn't see it on the screen. I got up to walk out, fully expecting them to tell me I failed. And they said, "Congratulations, you passed." And I was like, so I called Steve immediately, just, all excited. Then they reached out to Steve to audit my background, verify that I did what I said I had done. And once they did all that, I got my certification. That was sometime around April of 2014, I believe. And then I got hired right around that time. I interviewed for a position for director of infrastructure, but they needed security as well. And I started a company called Healthcare Blue Book. And so it was my first time really experiencing building a security program. And I found I had the same excitement that I did when I was building a network or building any kind of IT program.
Get the put together, get that engineering mindset, figuring out what are the requirements, what do I have at my disposal as far as tools and budget
Really.
together?
Oh, it was, yeah. So it was such a rewarding experience. This was a startup company. And the other thing that was it was perfect was I was still new to certain aspects of it, such as creating risk assessment program, creating incident response programs, creating the policy documentation, compliance with HIPAA. Those were things that I hadn't had as much experience with as I had more with the engineering and setting up things and securing things in a more practical engineering side, right? And so Healthcare Blue Book was also growing. So they didn't know what they didn't know. And so I was perfect for them. And we grew together. And it was a really an overused word, but it was a really synergistic relationship because they benefited from me doing what I was doing, and I benefited from the experience. And I built their program, and then once the few years into it, I shifted my title to just executive director of information security, and everything was just purring like a kitten. We were getting SOC 2 audits with zero exceptions. Security awareness training was a big piece of what I focused on. I have a unique style to that where I use a lot of my entertainment background to making it fun and entertaining. I even branded my emails and with a kind of a
That's
slightly
awesome.
humorous, like a cartoon face of me, like from the Dave Cave, and
Yep.
and everybody, and I got lots of positive feedback from that. And our click rates were really low, and and I was there for 10 years, and they ended up being purchased or acquired. And when they were acquired, they had a security staff, and I was more in the more of a CISO level person, and they already had a CISO. And so they ended up laying me off and then bringing someone in who was just a low level analyst starting out in security because that's really what they needed more. And I had no hard feelings, by the way. I cannot say enough good things about this company. The way they treated me, even in the end, I had the best 10 years working there. I love those people, still friends with the C-suite. They reached out to me personally to tell me how thankful they were to have me. They were just couldn't have been nicer. So, and they gave me a great severance package and lots of great not reviews, but references, that sort of thing.
That's awesome.
So after that, started looking, and I did some contract work. I did a little vCISO work, which I really enjoyed because I can meet with different companies and sort of help them with a problem. Well, here's a better way to do that, right? I feel like now I have the experience to do that. And then I spent 6 months at a company called Lucent Health, and I set up their security awareness program, changed it, created all that. It ended up not working out due to there were some security philosophy differences. So I decided better just to do it my own way, right, and do my own thing. So now, as of December, I've been starting down the virtual CISO road, and I've already met with a couple of companies and have given them some advice and helped with what they're trying to do, and I guess it keeps me interested because I'm constantly dealing with new problems every day, but it's all within my comfort zone. It's it's right on the edge of my comfort zone, which is always kind of a good place to be, where you're pushing yourself a little bit, but you're not like a fish out of water, So
Exactly. Because when you're in
mixing all
that
my metaphors.
when you're in that in that zone, that's where the growth happens, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So it's good to push the boundaries and make sure you're exploring the areas where you need to, where you might not, you know,
Yep.
have the best competency in, but you're digging in and you're doing your due diligence and you're getting there. So, speaking about problems, you mentioned the problems.
Mhm.
So as a virtual CISO, I can understand you're going to be helping different companies, you're going to have different projects. So you have a good background and context into, I would say, the different security threats that you're facing in the industries that you're serving. So my question is, what are the biggest security threats or threat that you're seeing right now in your industry, and how are you combating that? Most people, when I ask them this question, they say email phishing. Some people now are saying AI. I'm interested to hear you. What's your take, David?
Sure. Well, honestly, I'm probably not going to surprise you then. The biggest thing I saw was spear phishing. And
Yep, and it's
and
gonna get
maybe
worse.
Spear phishing. Well, yeah, spear phishing. I was going to say maybe, for instance, we had a situation at one company that I'm not going to mention where they already were getting encrypted emails. And by the way, I'm going to amend my answer slightly. I think encrypted emails are a big problem, and the whole concept of how we handle encrypted emails, I think, is not ideal. And I
Well,
think it
I
causes
think
more
email
problems than it
shouldn't be
needs.
used to transmit sensitive data regardless. You need to use for some
Well,
sort of
true.
secure file sharing.
But the secure file sharing in a lot of people's workloads ends up somehow coming to their email, like as an email
Yeah,
notification. You see what I'm saying? In other words, there has to be a notification that they've received
yeah,
something.
there's a notification, but at least with the secure file transfer portal, you can put some controls in place around the identity and access management and mitigate some of the risk a little bit more than just having the attachment or data
Oh,
just
well,
sitting in
what
the
I'm
email.
exactly but the spear phishing I'm talking about. So, and yeah, that's actually what I'm referring to. So, I'll give you a specific situation that actually occurred just this past year, but the names will be changed to protect the guilty. So
Yes, of
basically,
course.
I work with a team of people who received emails regularly. Part
Mhm.
of their normal job was to receive sensitive data that would come
Mhm.
through file sharing portals that and would have encrypted connections. The problem with that is, while yes, you want that encrypted, I'm not saying, believe me, I'm not going to tell you don't encrypt data as it's going across. But the problem is security software can't see it when it's encrypted. So you've got the very security thing creating problems with security, because what the hackers did in this case was they used the legitimate file sharing site, which is not that uncommon. They then, so somehow, first off, they hacked one of the senders. So
Mhm.
then they sent an email that was so perfectly crafted that it looked exactly like what it was supposed to be. It was sent from the real person. It had a link to the real file share site they always used.
Yep.
And then once you got to that file share site is where the payload was.
Yep.
There was
Yep. I've seen that.
nothing even, and so our team couldn't even tell if it was real or fake because we couldn't see into it without opening the link, right?
Yep.
So that's what I mean by encrypted email. While it's
I
a
get you.
solution in
Yeah.
itself, it also
Yeah.
creates its own problem. So I think
Yep.
that's something that needs to be addressed in the industry and improved. I think because it also makes security awareness training, which would be the other thing I would point out, but it would make security awareness training is difficult already. But one of the things that you need to do with security awareness training is keep it simple and keep it practical and have it be relevant. And what I mean by that is telling somebody what spear phishing is not good enough. In this situation, the user needs to know exactly what to look for and how to know if the email is fake, or at least whether or not to report it. Well,
Yep.
when they imitate it that perfectly, and when they do everything where, I mean, it's really from the person, it's really the link. I mean, you can't tell the user anything because I can't even tell by looking at it that it's fake.
Well,
How can I
I'll
expect the end user to do that, right?
yeah, and I can definitely hear you on that because I've actually been in a situation where I was on a penetration testing engagement and I received a OneDrive share link to a file from a client that I was not expecting, and I immediately knew. I was like, this has got to be some phishing setup because I do a lot of phishing campaigns. I'm on the other side of that, so I do a lot of penetration
Right.
testing engagements with social engineering. So I copy a lot of these scenarios exact to the T, the way you just said, David. But what I feel like what needs to get better in the industry to further your point is the vendors that are hosting specifically these secure file transfer portals. They need to have the right controls in place to make sure that people aren't using their services as basically a legitimate proxy to deliver their payloads.
Right.
Microsoft's getting good and better at. Microsoft's getting good and better. There's always ways for people to obfuscate and encrypt their payloads within the documents or files that they're serving. So it's always going to be a cat and mouse game,
Oh, of
right?
course.
So it's always us going to have to adjust. I think where we can really provide value to the end users in this scenario is just to always just train them to always be on guard and to question, if it was unsolicited and they're not expecting it,
But
That's
again,
to one degree, but then again, to play the
in
devil's
their
advocate, of
job,
course, someone could send them something that is exactly what they're looking like again,
yeah,
and they
in this
just
particular circumstance, all of their emails were unsolicited. That was how they worked. So they were not
so they're used to
told.
that already.
They were already
Yeah,
used to. I mean, emails came in unsolicited that were legitimate, right?
yeah,
Because it was a customer. It was like a client relationship that they were working with. So the clients would.
okay.
That was the communication was, hey, here's a file, you need to do X. Then they would receive the file. Well, so yeah, so that's a challenge. The other challenge I see in the industry is security awareness training. And I know and I'm going to kind of take I think, slightly unique take on it, I think, at least not one I've heard a lot of other people say. Everyone says security awareness training, yes. I think where we're having issue is in the sheer problem of how to conduct that training. We've got all these products out there. One I love dearly is KnowBe4. I love KnowBe4. I use it. I've used it many places. I've enjoyed it. They have great videos. They have The Inside Man, which is that sort of TV series that's, security based. Really cool stuff. Now, unfortunately, the problem is videos just aren't enough. And what I see in the industry is so many businesses and companies like KnowBe4. I'm not just picking on KnowBe4. They're just the one that I've used the most. But there are multiple companies like this. They have their software set up to, hey, here's some fake emails. Okay, you clicked a link. Here's the training video. And then, hey, new employee, here's a training video.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, it's time for re-up our training. Here's a training video. So the problem is, and I realize that I come from a small business background, and small businesses can do this better than big businesses, and I understand this. But I do think that in an effort to save money, we try to automate. Back when I first got into IT, there were departments in a company for training in the larger companies. They actually had a department because, automated training wasn't as big a thing. Now everybody's eliminated those departments with online training. My feeling is that they need to suck it up a little bit, spend a little money, and actually have a training department again, because I can tell you, no matter how good these videos are, and they are good, but I don't care how good they are, they're not enough. And nothing replaces an instructor who gives personal feedback and who directly communicates with the end user and answers questions and is there for them. Nothing beats that. There is just no way they can. Now,
I definitely agree.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. You're not going to get that same energy and feedback from one of those animated series versus someone delivering and driving it home with their charismatic personality face to face, in the room.
That's been granted, I've worked at smaller companies that can afford for me to do that. I understand this. And I understand when I bring this up, there's a lot of big companies. I brought this up in a roundtable once, and it was mostly with large, like Amazon style companies. And they're like, oh, that's nice. Because they don't even want to consider it because they're too big. They're so big, it would need to be a department. Well, at the end of the day, yes. Is it worth the cost? That I can't answer. I'm not going to tell you that they need to spend the money, because I don't know exactly what, each business has its own decision there, right? The business owner makes that decision. But I can tell you that they won't get adequate security training until they do. So it just depends on whether or not that's worth it to them.
I'd say every company needs it, because at the end of the day, even the smaller companies, if you're a smaller shop and you're not aware of these types of risks that you're facing in the cybersecurity landscape of 2025, you get hit with something that you're not prepared for. You don't have the right, controls in place, or, even just retroactive insurance policy, backups, just depending on the whatever the incident is, it could put you out of business. And then I bet you'll think it was worth it then.
Absolutely. And exactly. And that's part of what I offer as a VC. So I'll actually do some training for smaller companies. I'll offer to conduct sessions for them. Again, I also think that in the security space, one of the things we lack is, I think the security companies like KnowBe4 know it, and they do it right. They understand entertainment the spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, right?
Yeah.
The got to make it entertaining to engage people. They're more apt to watch it. Okay. Well, that needs to be the same idea with instructor-led training. You can't
Yeah.
just come in. My daughter was working at an accounting firm as an intern recently. She's in college, and my youngest, and she called me up and said, "Dad, you need to be doing their security awareness training." Oh my God, it was so bad. But what happened was they just had some IT guys do it. Well, the IT guys who were not necessarily good trainers. I mean, these probably really smart guys who know their IT, no criticism of them there, right? But the problem is, they're IT guys. They know they can do the training. No, it takes a person who can do training to do training. And because what they did was, I think she said that they focused on, hey, here's this cool antivirus software we use. Now we're able to do this and this and this because they were geeks and they were geeking out over the software to a crowd of people who could care less about that. Meanwhile, they barely touched on, oh, by the way, don't click a phishing email. It was like, hey, isn't this cool software? And don't click phishing. And that was like the training. So
hilarious.
Yeah. So my daughter, she's like, Dad, you need to reach out to these folks and give them tips on training,
While we're talking about training, kind of shifts gears here. We like to try to extract value for, again, people who are already in the field. They're trying to advance their career, or people who are looking to transition into the field. What's one piece of advice that you would give someone that's just starting out their journey into cybersecurity?
Well, my personal advice would be to start in another area of IT and work your way to security. I think the coming out of college as a security professional is not the best way to go, in my personal opinion. I would recommend someone do some time, as I call it, doing their time on either a help desk, some kind of infrastructure, also, or software development, because you're going to be working with people who do this stuff. You're going to need to help them do it more securely. Just because someone's an engineer doesn't mean they understand security. So you need to at least be able to understand what they're doing in order to help them do it in a better, more secure way. That's the first piece of advice. Go ahead.
So just to add in on that, I agree to a certain extent. Yeah, so they should start off in a position in IT, but I know some people who were able to jump straight into a cybersecurity position after they did establish their foundation in IT first. Because, like you said, you in order to help your counterparts and other people you'll be working with do things in a secure manner or consult or help out, you have to understand what they're doing in the first place and how the whole landscape comes together. You need to know on-prem, you need to know cloud, you need to understand identity and access management, you need to understand networking, network security, whole separate domain. These are all the different facets, but it really depends.
Yeah,
my 2 cents.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and to your point, at the end of the day, they just need to learn those things before they get into security. How they do that, of course, varies journey to journey.
People just try to jump the whole fundamentals far, and then they don't even understand how to break down a problem layer by layer to figure out where you need to dive deeper into.
Exactly. And we've seen this in IT. I mean, I've been in IT for 25 years, right? We've seen this in all facets of IT, but there are people who can take a test, and they can really take a test. And then when they get into the real world, they don't understand the practical application of what they answered right on the test. They knew enough to answer it correctly on the test, but that doesn't mean when they then were confronted with it that they actually knew what to do. And that seems maybe counterintuitive to people, but work problems don't necessarily equal real life, and real life is just a different beast. So that's my first piece. So my first piece of advice is somehow get that fundamental background, get those basics down in either software development or infrastructure. Both would be wonderful, but different people think different ways.
Anywhere you do that.
Absolutely. Look, I'm an infrastructure guy. Software development is my weakness. So then that leads to number 2. You can't know everything. So you've got to remember to be collaborative. And what I mean by collaborative is I see too many security people who think in absolutes. They only see things from the security perspective. They have to remember that they're not there to secure the network or to secure the company. They're there to give advice to the business owners on the best way to secure the company. Okay. They're not there to tell the business owners they're wrong and they have to do it this way. They're there to say, well, this is the best way to acquire these results. These are the consequences of not doing this. Now, you as the business owner have to make the decision of whether or not those consequences outweigh the necessary security to avoid them. There are times when it is perfectly acceptable in security to say, I'm going to not do this and accept the risk. That's actually not always a bad thing. Mm-hmm. That is a mistake that a lot of younger to the industry, security people make. I can't tell you the number of times that I've gone into companies and people are like, oh God, the security guy oh my God, he just doesn't, everything has got to be exactly done this way. And that's not how security works.
Yeah, I definitely agree. You have to take in the perspectives and the user experience, balance that with so many other different variables like the budget of the company, et cetera, the risk tolerance of the business owner, et cetera. But like you said, you're there to be that guiding light. At the end of the day, that decision is going to come from the top down, and you can only do what you're getting that buy-in from your leadership on. So it's your job to just communicate those risks in a manner that they understand it and are able to make an educated decision on what they would like to do, and you execute that vision from there. Right. So definitely can understand that, and I've always tried to be the person who figures out if I say no, but I say but we can do no, but we can, not just no.
It's not just no, it's how can we solve the problem that needs to be solved in a way that is more secure, right? Yep. So someone comes to you, I need you to open port 80 to the world, whatever. Okay, no, but what is it you're actually trying to do? Because that's the other key is what's asked of you is often not necessarily what's needed. It's their understanding of what's needed. So what you need to be able to do is interpret and clarify the actual need and then meet that need in a way that is as secure as it can be while also meeting that need. So Exactly. And the other thing is, again, businesses have different risk tolerances to what you just said. So therefore, just because business A may really desperately need to do this thing, but business B, not so much. Right.
Yep.
So I think you have to understand that. So you have to have a more macro level and be able to look at things and kind of back up and look at, well, is this truly benefit the business? If we lock this down this much and then it causes this consternation for the customers, is this going to translate to lost revenue? Versus if we don't lock it down and we then have fines or we have a breach and then that's this much revenue. So you have to weigh those out.
You're playing that balancing.
And you have to present that in a logical and a understandable, easy way to the C-suite and to the board, right? And that's the other thing. One of the things I do with all companies when I'm helping them out is I run a risk assessment and then I create a risk matrix for them. And in that, I look at here's the risk, here's what the risk means, here's the consequence if something were to happen. Here's the likelihood. I have a likelihood register. I have a risk mitigation list, risk acceptance all the way down to risk transference, where you say, okay, we're hosting this offsite here and they're maintaining this. So we've transferred the security risk to them through, we make sure. Now that's a tricky one because just because you host it offsite doesn't mean you've actually transferred the risk.
Yeah. You're still responsible.
Depending on the contractual agreements.
Even if you have contractual agreements that put the security and the liability
on you.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Well, I'll talk for a second,
David,
until you come back.
There
you are. Did I freeze on you?
Yeah, we froze for a second. But what I was just going to say is that the liability, yes, in contractual agreements, you could have transferred it, and you can sue them and get that money back at some point in time. But you still lose out because it's your face. At the end of the day, you're responsible.
Well, absolutely. No, very true. Again, that's one of the decisions. And if you do transfer that risk, then what happens if something goes wrong? You're still, I totally agree. It's not good, we don't have to worry about that anymore. it's just okay, we've decided this is the best way to handle this, right? So yeah, so I think those are the big things that people joining the security industry, and honestly, I think security veterans need to remember, because there's still too many security veterans out there who believe that they're not collaborative. They don't say no to that, but how can we do this in a way that works? Or what is it you're trying to do? That's actually even better. Don't even say no at all. Just go, what is it you're trying to do? Right. Yeah. So a lot of veterans need to learn that skill. And then one other thing, I'm sorry, I just thought of, that's not really so much for the newbies as it is for everybody, but in security awareness training, you need to communicate. You need to make sure that all the people in the company feel like we're allies and there's not adversarial. Punishing people. Now, I realize you've got some end users who, excuse me, I got someone calling me. Oh, well, okay, I was going to tell her to call her back. When you've got end users who maybe just keep clicking and don't do anything you say and never listen and constantly click, okay, that's different. I'm not talking about those folks. I have found that those folks rarely exist. There are a few, but every company I've been to, I've only had one company that had one or two people like that. Every other company I've had that you could work with people, and you had some that were more challenged than others that maybe took a little longer. Maybe they were a little old lady from Pasadena who was just doing this job on the side, and she was struggling because she was having a hard time with computers anyway, and that's understandable. But truly, people who are truly just won't listen and don't do it, I haven't found as many people in the companies that I've seen. So that's an outlier, is my point. It exists, but that you deal with it on a one-on-one basis. But the general group, the general populace of the company needs to know that you're there as their ally, that they are the first line of defense. So, and the reason I say that is I've seen a trend in some of the security groups where people are like, you punish them, and then that sets an example for everyone else, and they'll be too scared to click. And
too scared to report even sometimes when they do click. And that's even worse.
That's even worse, exactly. And in fact, that is something I've seen just recently at a company, is the CEO is determined to punish anyone who clicks because it just made him mad. And I'm like, then all you've done is created an adversarial relationship with your audience, with your team. And then you're not going to know what the heck's going on because nobody's going to tell you because they're going to be too scared to, right? So that's another thing I think in the industry, so that I emphasize in my training is, hey, I'm here for you. You click a link, you're human. In fact, I've clicked a link before. I was very embarrassed, but you know what I did? I didn't hide it out of embarrassment. I used myself as an example in my training. I said,
there's something for everybody.
I'm the security guy. Yeah, I'm the security guy, and I fell for this.
Yep.
So don't feel stupid if you fall for a phishing email. It's okay. Right. So those are my big passions. You can tell I get passionate and animated when I talk about them, because those are things I've seen so much in the industry, and they make me mad when I see people mishandle them. And so those are the messages I like to get across.
Well, that's awesome, right? David, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing your incredible insights and experience with us today. I would definitely love to have you back on the show again. It's definitely been a pleasure. So for our listeners that would like to connect with you online, where can they find you?
Well, they can find me at David_McHenry at Comcast.net, or they can find me on LinkedIn under David McHenry. And I guess I'll put my LinkedIn link in your chat. Do we have a chat with this tool, or?
Yeah. There should be a chat window. There's a chat window you can drop.
There is. Give me 2 seconds here, and I really appreciate you guys having me on. You give me a chance to share my opinions on things. As you can tell, I get a little passionate,
and that's what we like.
Yep, I have strong opinions, because when you do this, as long as I have, you see things. So there's my LinkedIn profile, and those are the two biggest ways you can reach me.
Awesome. So I'll put that in the show notes for our listeners. If this is your first time listening to us, whatever medium that you're hearing this on, please don't forget to subscribe and like for more conversations with IT and security leaders like David. Until next time, stay safe, stay secure.